Among the many figures who pass through the pages of the Hebrew Bible, few are as brief in appearance yet as enduring in mystery as Melchizedek. With no lineage, no narrative background, and no return after his scene, he appears suddenly in Genesis 14:18, offering bread and wine to Abram and blessing him in the name of the Most High God. This lone verse has invited centuries of speculation, reverence, and theological interpretation. But what if this fleeting encounter holds not a puzzle to decode, but a fully realized theological structure, a moment in which name, role, action, and symbol converge to reveal a model of divine mediation? A common translation of Genesis 14:18 reads, "And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine, and he was priest of God Most High." This simple statement unfolds into a surprising density of meaning. In Melchizedek, we find the union of kingship and priesthood, the offering of elements rich in biblical symbolism, and a divine title, El Elyon, that transcends national boundaries. The Hebrew text reveals even more. His name means King of Righteousness. His city, Shalem, evokes peace and completeness, and the ritual he performs with bread and wine prefigures sacramental gestures that echo throughout scriptural tradition. Each word is precise, deliberate, and deeply charged. Rather than treat Melchizedek as an anomaly, a priest before there was priesthood, a king outside any covenantal lineage, we will explore him as a structural and theological archetype. His presence in the narrative is not marginal, but foundational. He embodies a set of dynamic relationships between identity and action, ritual and office, humanity and God. These relationships are not linear but interwoven, forming a system of mutual dependence and resonance. In Melchizedek, we see how divine intention becomes embodied in human action, how ritual elements signify transcendent realities, and how blessing is not given abstractly but mediated through coherent spiritual roles. By reading this verse closely in the original Hebrew and tracing the relationships it encodes, we uncover not only new insights into who Melchizedek is, but also a living model of how the sacred operates. The logic of his presence is neither arbitrary nor mysterious. It is deeply ordered, richly symbolic, and structurally elegant. So today we will explore this order, how Melchizedek's identity, action, and office relate to one another, how bread and wine become channels of divine presence, and how a single verse gestures toward a universal theology of priesthood, mediation, and blessing. Melchizedek's identity is revealed through the Hebrew composition of his name itself. Melchizedek, literally meaning King of Righteousness. His identity is not merely descriptive but definitive. His name expresses moral authority intertwined directly with his role as priest and king. The Hebrew roots suggest a figure whose essential nature and function cannot be separated. Righteousness here is not an abstract quality, but deeply connected to divine order and justice, integral to Melchizedek's entire being and mission. And this identity shapes his actions. Melchizedek brought out bread and wine, gestures laden with significance far beyond ordinary hospitality. The Hebrew verb hotzi, used for brought out, indicates intentionality and purpose. Bread represents life-sustaining nourishment, symbolizing the divine provision foundational to human existence. Wine adds a deeper dimension: joy, abundance, covenantal celebration, and divine blessing. Melchizedek's role as a priest directly inspires this act, grounding it within sacred ritual rather than mundane generosity. The interplay of these elements, his name, his identity as king and priest, and his sacramental action, forms a deeply coherent unity. Melchizedek's identity gives meaning to his actions. His actions express and validate his priestly identity, and both together illustrate an integrated divine vocation. This intricate connection exemplifies how spiritual authority manifests concretely and meaningfully in human action. Melchizedek's offering of bread and wine is not simply a generous gesture toward Abram. It embodies profound symbolic mediation between human and divine realms. Each element conveys unique meanings that complement one another and together elevate the offering into a sacred act. Bread, lechem, symbolizes the grounding of humanity in divine sustenance, recalling later biblical images such as manna in the wilderness or the bread of presence in the tabernacle. It represents basic necessity provided by divine care, signaling humanity's absolute dependence on God. Wine, yayin, enriches this basic sustenance with joy, celebration, and the richness of divine blessing. It is more than nourishment. It symbolizes abundance and fulfillment, connecting human existence not merely to survival, but to spiritual flourishing and covenantal relationship. Melchizedek's decision to present both elements together demonstrates profound spiritual insight. The movement from bread to wine symbolizes humanity's spiritual journey, from mere subsistence toward deep communion with the divine. Yet, this symbolic progression is deeply integrated with Melchizedek's role as priest. Without bread, wine loses its grounding. Without wine, bread remains incomplete. Only together can these elements express fully the sacramental nature of Melchizedek's offering. The text further deepens Melchizedek's significance by firmly embedding his identity and office within the divine context of El Elyon, God Most High. This name for God transcends ethnic and tribal affiliations, pointing toward a universal deity who rules over all creation. Melchizedek, as both king and priest, is thus positioned at a unique intersection between human governance, divine mediation, and cosmic universalism. His priesthood does not merely represent local worship, it signifies a broader theological reality, a universal acknowledgement of God's sovereignty. This universal aspect is crucial. Melchizedek's priesthood to El Elyon expresses a cosmic perspective, God as supreme authority above human divisions. His presence demonstrates how priestly mediation can transcend narrow boundaries, pointing toward inclusivity rather than exclusivity. Thus, Melchizedek is not simply another ancient priest, but embodies a vision of divine-human interaction that spans cultural and temporal boundaries. He becomes a living symbol of a spiritual reality in which human roles, divine purposes, and universal values are seamlessly conjoined. In this role, Melchizedek simultaneously symbolizes kingly righteousness, priestly intercession, and divine authority. None of these elements exist independently, each reinforces and substantiates the others. His kingship aligns with peace, shalem related to shalom. His priesthood anchors him to God Most High, and his actions concretely manifest divine grace. Thus, his identity is integrated fully into the divine cosmic order, revealing a deeply woven spiritual coherence. The culminating dimension of Melchizedek's presence is revealed in his ability to transform ordinary hospitality into divine blessing. By offering bread and wine to Abram, Melchizedek initiates a gesture that becomes sacramental. It does not merely provide sustenance, it communicates divine favor and establishes spiritual communion. This act, recognized as priestly mediation, not only nourishes physically, but spiritually elevates Abram's relationship with God. What begins as hospitality evolves into a profound act of blessing. The elements offered, bread and wine, serve as tangible symbols through which divine grace flows. As a result, Abram's encounter with Melchizedek becomes a pivotal spiritual moment, one in which a universal priesthood bestows a blessing that transcends mere human interactions. Melchizedek's ritual thus reinforces the presence and authority of God Most High, enhancing Abram's own journey toward divine fulfillment and purpose. This cycle of hospitality, sacrament, and blessing is mutually reinforcing. The gesture of welcome deepens into spiritual mediation, and mediation leads naturally into profound blessing. Each element strengthens the significance of the others, demonstrating a dynamic and meaningful spiritual rhythm. Thus, Melchizedek exemplifies how everyday actions, when performed with spiritual intentionality, can become powerful conduits for divine grace. When approached with careful, textual, and logical analysis, Melchizedek emerges as far more than a mysterious biblical figure. He represents a coherent, deeply meaningful model for understanding spiritual identity, priestly mediation, and universal blessing. Through an intricate tapestry of Hebrew meanings, symbolic actions, and divine titles, Genesis 14:18 presents a profoundly integrated theological vision. Melchizedek thus serves as a template, not just historically or typologically, but spiritually and theologically, illustrating how identity, action, and universal vocation are intertwined in divine reality. His brief appearance embodies a sophisticated framework of sacred coherence, inviting us to reconsider the profound possibilities inherent in even the simplest acts of divine human encounter.